That was a moment in history that exposed the role of economics today as not particularly different to that of the Bible in the Middle Ages, a provider of excuses for the powerful to do as they like.
Does an overall coherent economic theory exist? And if not, is it possible to ever have one? Yanis.
You see, Roger, models are mathematical systems of equations that can only predict anything if solved. But to be solved, the models need to assume that which they need to demonstrate. And that is a tendency of the capitalist economy to some equilibrium, dynamic equilibrium, but equilibrium nevertheless. And there's the rub, because capitalism, from where I'm standing, is a system that is permanently in disequilibrium. And therefore, predictive failures are hardwired into every economic or central bank model. And I think that was a deeper meaning behind the quip by John Kenneth Galbraith that econometrics was devised as if to make astrologists look good. Now, that doesn't mean we don't need economic theory. What it does mean is that we need economic theorists with a rare combination of gifts as outlined by Keynes. Remember what he said? That the good economic policy expert economist must be simultaneously mathematician, historian, philosopher, and policymaker. They must contemplate the particular in terms of the general and be able to touch abstract and concrete ideas in the same flight of fancy, of thought. That they must study the present in the light of the past for the purposes of the future. That they must be purposeful and disinterested. And they must be as aloof as artists and as grounded as policymakers. To sum up, in order to be socially useful, economic policymakers must know not only how to set aside mathematical economic models at critical moments of decision-making, but more importantly, how to be, as Keynes said, disinterested, how to be, in other words, independent of vested interests, not of government, but of vested interests. For instance, the financiers who, after 2008, bullied policymakers into adopting a cynical combination of harsh austerity for the vast majority out there and, essentially, socialist money printing for themselves. That was a moment in history that exposed the role of economics today as not particularly different to that of the Bible in the Middle Ages, a provider of excuses for the powerful to do as they like.
Okay, Yanis, thank you very much. Let's move on to the main theme of the debate and the questions. We're breaking down the big question into three smaller ones. And the first line is, should we conclude that central bank failures to predict, let alone avoid, economic crises are evidence of a deep underlying flaw in their understanding? I will come back to you on that, Yanis, because I think that follows quite neatly from what you were saying there, and then we'll take the question on further. But Yanis, give me your thoughts on that.
Well, clearly, the understanding of most of us is flawed. There's no doubt about that. But the main problem, if you let's really focus on the real issue. The real issue is that before 2008, central bankers completely missed the asset price inflation, which was being created by a tsunami of private debt. And they focused only on price inflation, not asset price inflation. In the meantime, what was happening under the surface was this explosion of money printing by the private sector, by Wall Street, through structured derivatives and so on. And that brought about the complete collapse, the catastrophe of 2008. And then at that moment, the tragedy of the central banker begins. Because our states, our governments, failed in their task to design political economic measures through the legislature, through our parliaments. Our parliaments had to step in and to take upon themselves the task of refloating the real economy, real investment. Instead of that, what they did was they let the bankers save the financial sector by printing tsunamis of money. So you had huge liquidity, the largest liquidity in the history of capitalism, while everybody else, the politicians, let the ball drop. They practiced austerity. Austerity destroyed aggregate demand, destroyed investment. So you had this immense incongruity. The greatest supply of money, liquidity, printed by the central banks, the lowest level of demand for investment because of the austerity that was practiced in Europe and in the United States, essentially. All right. Now, what happens when supply is permanently above demand? The price of this thing goes down. What's this thing? Money. What is the price of this thing? It's the real interest rate. So you can't blame them for very low interest rates because they were left to their own devices because we politicians, and I put myself in this category, we dropped the ball.
Are there theories, ideas, economic theories that we should grab more with both hands, or should we just conclude perhaps far more radical alternatives are necessary?
Well, what I tell my students at the university is that they have a duty to study every single economic theory ever come out, understand their flaws intimately, and then when it comes to actually passing judgment, to forget all of them and just retain all the sharpness of the mind that this study of eclectic study of different theories. What I am utterly against, and I actually think that the clear and present danger for our social economies are economic models. I'm a mathematician. I have a PhD in economic modeling. I love doing it, but it's a bit like chess. If you had an army general, trying to evince from chess the right strategy for fighting a real war out there, that general would be dangerous. Similarly, an economist who takes a model and tries to evince from it the right monetary or fiscal or investment policy is a clear and present danger to the rest of society. Regarding price controls, look, it depends on your understanding of the way markets work. If you think that they are approaching something like perfect competition, then of course there should be no price controls because the moment you distort the market. But when you see that in the middle of an energy crisis, energy companies like EDF make a mint. They have huge profits margins that are increasing during the energy. It's clearly a distorted market already. And when you have EDF taking money, profits, effectively rents, out of the British economy, and being a state-owned French company, use it to subsidize French workers, French customers, then surely you should slap a huge price control on them. And anything else is simply being, complicit in what is a major distortion. On the question of central bank independence, look, central banks are not independent of anything. Maybe they're independent of the government, but they are certainly not independent. The European Central Bank is the most heavily politically dependent bank in the history of the world, because they can do nothing without the green light from the Eurogroup, which is an unelected cabal of finance ministers who don't even tell their parliaments what they have ordered the European Central Bank to do. To think of that as an independent central, it's independent of democracy, it's independent of the demos, but so is the Bank of England in a way, right? And I think we should very seriously consider different ways of appointing the boards of directors of central banks.
So that's interesting, Yanis. So what you're saying is it's the personnel who are there and the way that they are selected that's the problem, fundamentally.
I think so. And who are they answering to? I'm Athenian, right? So I have a very deep-seated belief in juries from the ancient Athenian experiment with judges. Yeah. So imagine if you had through sortition, a kind of board that can be selected randomly, but from a pool of people who have expertise and represent different parts of society, from businesses, trades unions, municipalities, and so on. And they are the ones to which the central bank directors are answerable to, and to whom they have to explain what they've done.
All right. Well, Vicky, is the demos the answer?
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below, or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.